Okay. Hi, everybody. If you're in my side of the world, good morning. Other places in the world, our speaker, good night. Here we are. Welcome to Reco12, our debut podcast in the Afro-Euro time zone. My name is Karen A. in Jerusalem, and I'm a recovering addict in a few different fellowships. It's not really important, but just for the record, in OA, CODA, Al-Anon, to name a few. It is my honor and blessing to be here to share my recovery with you, to share the recovery of other fellows of mine who generously share their experience, strength, and hope with other addicts who are suffering. I guess maybe before I introduce our wonderful special guest speaker, the founder of the Reco12 podcast, maybe we'll take a moment of silence and all in our own way with our own higher power, say a prayer for our own continued recovery and for all addicts out there who are still suffering. Okay, we send you all our love and light, as Justin says. I think we'll open up with the set-aside prayer, and then we'll introduce our guest speaker. Dear God, please set aside anything we think we know about ourselves, about our disease, about the big book, the 12 steps, the program, the fellowship, the people in the fellowship, and all spiritual terms, especially you, so that we may have an open mind and a new experience with all of these things. Please help us see the truth. We surrender this next hour to you. Your will, not ours, be done. Okay. No further ado. Today's speaker is Justin B., the awesome Justin B., who will be speaking on recovery and life principles in the Serenity Prayer. We'll get to his talk and the Q&A afterwards in just a minute. First, some business. The Reco12 family of recovery resources continues to grow and has more and more resources for the addict and the loved ones of those addicted. That includes you CODAs, you Al-Anons, you ACOAs, etc., however you identify. Reco12 shares and a couple other super exciting projects that are quickly approaching are coming down the pike. One of which is a big book roundtable discussion where we'll be diving into the first 164 pages of the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous with a couple of recovered individuals who are past speakers on Reco12 and who really try and know and live the big book one day at a time. We'll also be doing another amazing project on real life recovery information and solutions. Justin, by the way, I love this stuff. Practical examples as found in the big book of AA in regards to real world recovery and life problems. Your donations and subscriptions are making this all possible, as there are costs to build and maintain all of them. On that note, Reco12 is a self-supporting service, and we appreciate your help in keeping us working our step 12 in this manner. We gratefully accept one-time contributions through PayPal and Venmo through the links that I posted in the chat and show notes. I'll post them again soon. We also offer a monthly subscription program called Reco12 Spearheads. To join in and help support these cool recovery projects, please consider donating at www.reco12.com/support, or click in the chat of the live meeting or the show notes of the podcast. We look forward each meeting to grow deeper in effectiveness and understanding as we learn from and with and alongside our special speakers. Today, we are blessed to learn and grow with Justin B. Here's a little bit about our guest speaker. Justin B. is a sex addict and food addict living in the miracle of recovery. Justin's passion lies in sharing and learning about the commonalities and successful strategies for all types of addictions. Drawing from his personal experience, he has found that the power of the 12 steps is outlined in the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous and adapted to many other fellowships, has been instrumental in his own journey to recovery. Through his work on the ever-growing Reco12 family of recovery resources and his previous podcast, Journey Through Life, Justin has discovered that there are similarities in the success stories of people from all walks of life, regardless of their faith, background, nationality, orientation, race, or addiction. Justin's ultimate goal is to connect to people in a way that inspires them to recognize their own worth. Justin works in this goal for seeking guidance from his higher power and striving to reflect that light in a way that inspires hope, meaning, worth, and growth in others. As a podcast host, he strives to provide a space for his listeners to learn, grow, and heal. He's excited to be a guest on this new Reco12 project in the Afro-Euro time zone and share his experience, strength, and hope in this meeting today. Justin, the floor is yours.
Oh, so strange and so awesome to hear that come back from a different perspective and a different voice. Karen, you did an amazing job. Thank you so much for hosting this. Thank you for inviting me to do this. I'm super grateful, super excited, and miraculously, I'm awake at 1 o'clock in the morning, my time. That's crazy and a miracle. God's hand is definitely in this. As Karen mentioned, my name is Justin. I am how I introduce myself typically in a 12-step meeting. I'm a son of God. I'm a beloved son of an all-powerful, all-loving God who has redeemed me today in my addiction to sex, in my addiction to food. And what a miracle that is in my life. I'm grateful to be able to share on a topic that has really affected me a lot and strengthened me throughout the last about 10 years that I've been in the rooms of recovery. And it's something that I'm going to share my screen here. You know, the Serenity Prayer was brought into I'm not going to share my screen here if you can enable me to share my screen, Karen. If not, I'll just do it without sharing my screen. I can just go through it like that. But if you can figure that out, that'd be great. How do I do that? So at the bottom, there's a share screen logo. Sure. You might be able to give me permission to do that. Yeah.
Did I just share? I just enabled it.
Okay, perfect. All right. Thank you. I think this is it. Yes. All right. Can that be seen?
Yes.
Okay. There's the full Serenity Prayer. Okay. So I'm going to give a brief history of the Serenity Prayer in the rooms, in history and also in the rooms of Alcoholics Anonymous and 12-step groups. Reinhold Niebuhr is the person who wrote the Serenity Prayer in the early 1930s, sometime in 1932 or 1933. And in the late 1930s or early 1940s, an AA member read it in a newspaper or in a magazine and thought it was an amazing prayer that fit the AA model amazingly well. And it was officially put in the 12 Steps and 12 Traditions in 1941. And ever since then, this Serenity Prayer has been used in most AA meetings and most 12-step meetings at some point or another. And the version of it is, God, grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. And oftentimes there's a thy will, not mine be done added in at the end of it. And that's an amazing prayer. It's super powerful. There is a full version of this prayer that was originally written by Reinhold Niebuhr that most fellowships don't use. My home fellowship, SAL 12-step, uses this full version, and it has really had an effect on me. So I want to dive into this just a little bit. And I'm going to read that full version. I've got it shared on the screen here, and then I'm going to go through and kind of expound a little bit on it as I share here. God, grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. Living one day at a time, enjoying one moment at a time, accepting hardship as a pathway to peace, taking, as you do, this sinful world as it is, not as I would have it, trusting that you will make all things right if I surrender to your will, so that I may be reasonably happy in this life and supremely happy with you forever in the next. And then I add in there, your will, not mine, be done. Amen. And that is the full version of the Serenity Prayer that Reinhold Niebuhr originally wrote. Now, I think there's a few words that have changed here and there over the 100 years, not quite 100 years since it's been written. as I go and I Google it and look it up, I find a lot of different things where one word is different here and there. But this is basically the version that I use, and it means a lot to me. So I'm going to go through it here line by line. Starts out with God. The 12-step recovery is a spiritual program. God is at the center of this program. God, as I understand, or perhaps more accurately, as I do not understand God with my finite mind, is what I'm addressing here, who I'm addressing here. And then the first phrase, grant me the serenity. Now, what serenity? I Googled it. What does it mean? It's calmness of mind, tranquility of temper, placidity. Now, as I look through, as I strive to look through life or look at life through a spiritual lens, through a lens that I think God is putting up in front of me to see things through, God provides, I can experience this serenity. I can experience a little bit of peace and tranquility and placidity in my life as I see life through that lens. Next line, to accept the things I cannot, to accept the things I cannot change. So a previous speaker, one of the first, I think 20 or 30 speakers in the Reco12 podcasts, gave an example of this serenity prayer here. And he talked about the things I cannot change. So I want you to imagine a piece of paper, and across that piece of paper is a line drawn all the way across. And that line, except for about a half inch at the end of a couple of centimeters at the end of the piece of paper, that line constitutes God's line. That's the things I cannot change. To accept those things in my life, everything that can be done except for a very small amount. I can't change most things. That's God's line. And if I try to get on God's line and say, hey, I'm going to try and change this, that is when I start experiencing restlessness, irritability, and discontentedness. If I stay off of God's line, I can experience the serenity, the peace, the tranquility, the happy, joyous, and free that we learn of. And then the next line, courage to change the things I can. That's that small couple of centimeters at the end of the piece of paper where that line is drawn across. That is my line. And that is a pretty limited amount. I can change the way I react to things. I can change my attitude. I can change I can change the actions that I take in my life, but I can influence other people, but I can't make them change. Not even my own kids. Man, I've learned that the hard way. So that is my line. And as I mentioned before, if I stay off of God's line and on my line, I can experience that happy, joyous, and free, that tranquility. Now, if I can change something, I need to get to action and make the change and recognize that the only real changes I can make are in me and in that very small circle of influence that I have. And if I can gain peace, if I can accept that I can't control all that other stuff, that peace happens, that serenity happens. All right. Next line, the wisdom to know the difference. I love this question. I don't love it because I don't remember to ask it until I step on God's line. Is it any of my business that I try to be in somebody else's life? And if it's not any of my business, I need to give that to God and put it on God's line and say, hey, this is something I cannot change. And I'm going to step back away from it. And that's, for me, that's the wisdom to know the difference, is asking that question or a similar question. Is it any of my business? Can I affect this? And like I mentioned, this is where the version of the most used 12 steps, the most used serenity prayers and most 12-step groups stops. And it's a beautiful and powerful prayer. But there is more to this prayer. And as I mentioned, and as I read earlier, I'm going to go through the rest of these lines too. Let's dive deep. Let's dive deeper into the rest of this prayer. Living one day at a time. I mean, one day at a time. That's a 12-step mantra that we use all the time. And that is all I can do is today. I can't do tomorrow. Yesterday is now on God's line. I can't change what I did or what happened yesterday anywhere in my own life, in the world, anything. Yesterday's gone. I have no influence over. I can't change it. All I can do is live in today and strive to affect what I can, what is on my line today, so that tomorrow is a little bit better, hopefully, than yesterday was. But tomorrow doesn't even exist yet. I can't really worry about tomorrow. Tomorrow is definitely on God's line. If I get caught up in tomorrow, that's when anxiety happens. That's when, restlessness, irritability, and discontentedness happens. If I'm worried about, okay, what is the world going to look like tomorrow? What is going to happen with my children? What is going to happen with me and my work tomorrow? That's when all of that happens. Living one day at a time. Next phrase, enjoying one moment at a time. I believe thoroughly that God wants me to experience joy. He wants me to be happy, joyous, and free, to enjoy each moment to the extent that it can be enjoyed. Now, does that mean that if something extremely tragic happens in my life, in the life of someone that I love, that I can't feel sad, that I shouldn't feel sad, that I shouldn't feel angry, that I shouldn't feel mournful? No, that's not what it means. But joy isn't a passing emotion. Happiness is passing. Happiness it comes now. It's exciting. It's new. It's fleeting. Joy is more long lasting and it can be a lifelong thing. And joy has more ups and downs, whereas happiness is this, and then a crash. Happiness is through the roof. Now, this does not mean that I should expect each moment to be a thrilling rush of joy. Like I talked about, happiness, that thrilling rush. I can't live there all the time. My brain chemistry doesn't. It wants to regulate. It wants to bring things back to homeostasis, I believe is the medical scientific word. Bring it back to stability. And that's just where it is. And I think joy is there at that level of stability. Now, if I'm always seeking the dopamine rush, that feels boring, but it's not. And I think that's part of the peace that I gain from these principles in this prayer. Next line. Accepting hardship as the pathway to peace. That's a hard one. That is a hard one. Accepting hardship as a pathway to peace. I've learned that strength is most often forged in adversity, in hardship, in trials. If I'm just skipping through the daisies and tiptoeing through the tulips my whole life, I'm not going to get any stronger if my life is easy that way. And God knows that. And I believe that God wants me to be strong so that I can be a more effective instrument in his hands and help influence more people for good, for what God wants me to be, as God's agent, as God's spearhead in his creation. So God provides those exercises and struggles that will give me strength so I can experience future peace, even in trials that will come. And I think that those trials do provide future peace, like I just mentioned and alluded to. It's not necessarily that I'm going to, when I'm in the middle of a trial, a more difficult trial than my last one, it's going to be hard to sit there and go, I feel peaceful and tranquil. I feel that serenity, but I can feel acceptance in that time. And that's where it's important for me to be able to do that, to be able, you know what, this is where it is. How do I need to respond now? Do I need to curl up in the corner and just put my head in the sand and hope everything passes by? Or do I need to stand here, observe, and try to be of service to someone else in this hard time? Next line, taking as you do this sinful world as it is, not as I would have it. This line I customize a ton in my day-to-day life. Sinful, yes, that's an all-encompassing, negative situation. But I often customize it, taking this mean world, this angry world, this sad world, this seemingly unfair world, this busy world, this difficult world as it is. That's God's line. That's what it is. I can't change it. As it is, not as I would have it. When I try and change that with somebody else or something else that's out there that I have no control over, I then lose my serenity. I go into resentment. I go into discontentment, and I lose that. So I need to take this difficult world, this hard world, as it is, not as I would have it. Now, the way, and I mentioned this, the way I respond to these negative experiences completely on my line. And as I accept that, I can experience peace and serenity even in a chaotic world. You know, if I go and read the news today about everything, and I focus on the disasters that are out there that are completely outside of my purview, that I have no control over, I'm going to lose my serenity. I'm going to lose my peace. Next line, trusting that you will make all things right if I surrender to your will. And as I just read that, and as I did initially, I automatically emphasize a couple of words in that phrase. I like to emphasize the word all things right. If I surrender to your will, those are the things that I emphasize as I do this. All things right in this unfair and mean world. How is that possible? You know, it takes me to a Chinese proverb that I've heard a lot of people say before, and I'm going to go through it and kind of relay that. How can all things be made right, even in this really hard world? There's a Chinese proverb that goes something like this. A farmer and his son had a stallion, a horse that really helped the family earn a living. One day, the horse ran away, and their neighbors exclaimed, "Your horse ran away. What terrible luck." The farmer replied, "Maybe so. Maybe not. We'll see." A few days later, the horse returned home, leading a few wild mares back to the farm as well. The neighbors shouted out, "Your horse has returned and brought several horses home with him. What great luck." The farmer replied, "Maybe so. Maybe not. We'll see." Later that week, the farmer's son was trying to break one of the mares, and she threw him to the ground, breaking his leg. The villagers cried, Your son broke his leg. What terrible luck." The farmer replied, "Maybe so. Maybe not. We'll see." A few weeks later, soldiers from the National Army marched through town, recruiting all the able-bodied boys for the army. They did not take the farmer's son, still recovering from his injury. Friends shouted, "Your boy is spared. What tremendous luck." To which the farmer replied, "Maybe so. Maybe not. We'll see." And the moral of the story is, of course, that no event in and of itself can truly be judged as good or bad, lucky or unlucky, fortunate or unfortunate, but that only time will tell the whole story. And really, you know, our mortal life, our span of life on this earth is typically not long enough to find out the whole story in many of those cases. Some of the major inconveniences that may happen to me that I think are just not fair, maybe for my children and grandchildren, will turn out to be a major boon for them. You know, some of my ancestors walked, you know, over 1,500 miles across the plains, the Midwest of the United States, as they were driven out, persecuted in the East, and went and settled in the middle of the desert. And that was not hard. That was not easy on them. That was hardship. That was persecution. That was tough. But as I look back now, 4, 5, 6 generations later, that was something that brought so much strength and power and good into the lives of so many, even though it was not easy on them. I can't see the end story in my life, and those who went before me couldn't see the end story in their lives. I can trust, however, that God knows the end story and that it will be all right in the end if I surrender to God's will. And this seems to be, to me, to be the epitome of faith. And faith seems to be developed in a setting where we cannot see what lies ahead. If I know what lies ahead, there's no opportunity for growth. You know, page 68 in the big book says, "Just to the extent that we do as we think God would have us and humbly rely on God, does God enable us to match calamity with serenity." What is seemingly hard and bad today can be a massive strength to me or future generations. Next line, and I'll hustle through these next couple of lines as we're getting close to the bottom of the hour. It goes by fast. It goes by fast. All right. That I may be reasonably happy in this life. You know, the qualifying word and the word that actually brings me the most peace in that phrase is the word reasonably. Now, reasonably is defined as moderately or tolerably. Once again, it does not mean that I will always be happy and skipping through the daisies, but I will receive sufficient for my needs as I trust in God. I'll be reasonably happy. I'll experience that joy, that longer term happiness if I trust in God and if I live these principles. If I'm alive, if I have food, if I have shelter, if I have breath, I have sufficient for my needs today. You know, but there will be someday in the future, hopefully not tomorrow, hopefully not next week. Hopefully I get to live a long, healthy, productive life from here on out. But sufficient for my needs someday will mean that I will walk into death, hopefully with confidence that God has me there too. And that leads me to the last official phrase of this prayer: and supremely happy with you forever in the next. You know, I have hope that whatever lies beyond this world and this life is full of peace and serenity and light and love. And that brings me serenity. You know, I often add the phrase, your will, not mine be done, to the end of this. And that phrase, your will, not mine be done, encapsulates the whole Serenity Prayer as I've laid it out here, as I understand it. I'm going to read a couple things real quick here. On page 417 of the big book, this paragraph, I'll just read this whole paragraph. And acceptance is the answer to all my problems today. When I am disturbed, it is because I find some person, place, thing, or situation, some fact of my life unacceptable to me. And I can find no serenity until I accept that person, place, thing, or situation as being exactly the way it is supposed to be at this moment. I'll pause there. Accepting this sinful world, this hard world, as it is, not as I would have it. God's line, not my line. Nothing, absolutely nothing happens in God's world by mistake. Until I could accept my alcoholism, my sex addiction, my food addiction, my spouse's issues, this, that, until I could accept the things as they are, not as I would have them, I could not stay sober. Unless I accept life completely on life's terms, I cannot be happy. I need to concentrate not so much on what needs to be changed in the world as on what needs to be changed in me and my attitudes. You know, one of the ninth step promises from pages 83 and 84 of the big book says, we will comprehend the word serenity and we will know peace. This is my experience, at least for today. And I sure hope that I choose to wake up here in just a few hours in my time here and have these words of the Serenity Prayer be the first words that come to my consciousness, as they have been for the last few years, because it brings me a ton of peace, a ton of serenity, and a ton of strength throughout my day. And I think I'll pass with that. Thanks, Karen. I'm now ready to answer questions.
Amazing. Sure, mute. If anyone has any questions, please go ahead and post those in the chat. That was just such a great talk. I actually really identified with some of the stuff you said, and I have some questions of my own. Maybe someone will be so gracious as to type them up while I ask. Let me look at my notes here. I really got stuck on one of the early things you said, just because I related, and I know some of our beautiful participants on this call are also moms, parents like us. Not being able to control your kids. the $50 million question. Can you share on that? Like what work you did on that? I know this morning my own precious 9-year-old announced that she's not going to camp and I needed her to walk with a 7-year-old. And I was like, oh no, they're not going to be here on the Reco12 Afro-Euro debut. Like maybe down the line, but not today. I was like, okay, God. Yeah. So could you share about, where, how you accepted it, aside from it being plainly obvious that you can't make anyone do anything? Where you work your recovery there? Any miracles, experience, strength, and hope you have around letting go?
I'll share a few things. In my house of origin, my childhood house, there were a lot of high expectations, a lot of you will be this way because you carry our family name. You will do this, you will do that. And the expectation is that you will look perfect no matter how things are inside of you, no matter how things are inside of the house. When you go outside of the house, you will carry this image that things are all put together. And at least that was my understanding of it and how I felt about it. And I carried that into my family. My wife and I, we had twins. Our first children were twins, and they're now 24 years old. And for the first 14 years of their lives, that's how we raised them, with you will behave this way. You will do these things this way. And very quickly, I didn't learn it. I observed it. That control did not work with my children. And it took 14 years and me finally breaking down and entering the rooms of recovery and starting to learn that I don't have control. I don't got this. I don't got this. Our two younger children, who are now 17 and 16, so they're 6-7 years younger than our oldest. They got raised in a little bit different house where both my wife and I were working our recovery. My wife is also very deep, 8 years deeper than me in the 12-step rooms. And they were raised in such a different way than our older two, in a less controlling, a less expectation, but still, hey, we still taught, hey, here's what we want. Here's what we hope, but we can't control it. Now, any miracles in that? I think most of the miracles are that I'm not freaking out when my youngest, who is away at a camp right now, calls us today in tears because somebody was mean to her. I'm not thinking I'm going to come down there and I'm going to beat up that other person. I'm going to teach them a lesson, because it's off my line. All I can do is love my daughter and be there for her and help her know that I'm there for her no matter what. Even if she was the one being mean to somebody else, I'm still there for her and I love her. Now I'm not going to say, hey, that keep doing what you're doing. Keep being mean. No, that's not what I'm going to do, but I'll still love her and accept her and not reject her for being mean. And that is, I think that's a miracle, because with especially my oldest son, anytime I got word that he wasn't perfect, I really overreacted in ways that were not helpful. So I think that's my experience with that with my children. I hope that was helpful.
Definitely. And I certainly hope and pray for you and for everyone's call that hurt feelings is the worst of it. I know we have Al-Anons here. I have a friend whose son was found lifeless last week. Different people on these lines struggling with heavier stuff. Any thoughts on taking it up a notch where I hope you haven't had more strife than, again, just hurt feelings, but do you have any thoughts on that, whether from you or from your sponsees, of where you bring that Serenity Prayer in when we're saying life isn't meant to be a vale of tears, but things happen, and
things do happen, and I just need to be grateful that to this point, tragedy like that has not hit my immediate family. Yes, I've lost grandparents, I've lost aunts and uncles and stuff, but it's not been in necessarily tragic ways in my remembrance, but I do know a lot of people who have had tragic loss, had tragedy happen in their lives. And I hope, and I guess all I can say to this is I hope that striving to live in the solution today will make it so that when tragedy like that happens, when those things happen, that I will be able to mourn, yes, be sad, yes, but also strive to look from, hopefully from God's, a little bit closer to God's perspective, playing the long game, that it's not all about me and my sadness and my mourning right now. I think that's all I can say to that.
Yeah. And I love that you mentioned page 417 and accepting that everything happens in this God's world for a purpose. We have a question here from our friend Nira. If you hadn't needed to hustle through the latter part of the prayer, is there anything else you'd like to talk a bit more on? A deeper dive there.
Thanks, Nira. I'm grateful to have you here. I think the only thing in the latter end, those last couple of lines, I think I was able to touch on most of those things, but I think diving a little bit deeper in the fact that faith is developed in settings where I cannot see what lies ahead. So often I want, and many people that I work with, sponsees, especially newcomers, want their whole life to be laid out. I had somebody talking to me just today. This is a perfect example. Just today, I was talking to a person on the phone who said, I just want to know how to get from A to Z. I feel like I'm on C and I don't know how to get to Z, how to get to Z. I have no idea how to get there. And the getting to Z, getting to the end, has to be done through A, B, C, D. I can't skip from D to X. I can't skip from F to M. I have to go through each of the letters. And I think that's where faith grows, is not knowing what lies ahead and exactly how to get there, but trusting and taking the steps anyways and seeing it develop. Then I can look back and say, oh, that's how it's getting there. And with each step that I take, I can trust a little bit more that the next one will be a good one. I can accept that. I can trust that God will make all things right if I surrender to God's will and take that next step. Yeah, I think that's something I just could have developed a little bit more.
Great. Anyone else have some questions here?
I see some questions in the Q&A link there down.
There you go.
Yep.
Perfect. Love that. Okay, great. Let's take what Chloe said. Thank you. Is your peace with God different than your peace with people? Oh, what a great question.
That is a great question. Thank you, Chloe. I think so. My peace with God, even though I can't see, God isn't as tangible as a person. I've learned that I can rely on the quote arm of God more than I can rely on the arm of people. And what that means to me is, I'm a human. If somebody is looking at me to be their higher power and relying on my arm, I'm going to let them down at some point. I'm not perfect. And that happens in the lives of people that I look to as heroes, as people to look up to. I get let down. My childhood hero that I just worshiped, I just thought he was the greatest thing. As I learned more about him, I thought, you know what? He's a great athlete. That's about it. As a person, there's not much to look up to. But to God, I can at least God, as I currently understand God, and as I hope that I currently, as I continue to develop a closer and closer and clearer perspective, I have not been, how do I put this? I've been disappointed, but it's because I turned my back, I believe, or my expectations were not met. But as I look back, I can see more of that tapestry, more of that puzzle coming together, that God has a bigger plan for me than I have for myself. He has more, God has more in store for me than I know of. And so that's why my peace in God is different than my peace with people. I think I have been able to trust the God of my understanding, that I'm not going to be let down. Whereas with people, I don't have that same trust.
Definitely. Definitely. It kind of makes me think, Justin, of like, different breakups I had that made me make a life change, a career change. I wouldn't live in Israel. Kind of broken up with that person in New York. We all have our own variations on that. My mother had a husband who tragically left her, and he died, and then another one left her and he got Parkinson's. And it's like, she didn't know that later chapter in the story when disaster and heartbreak struck. So I get that. And it's just like when we turn our back, but just leaning into God, as Sheryl Sandberg says, Okay. Do we have any other questions here? Okay. Anonymous attendee said, love that share. Thank you so much. What other recovery prayers do you relate to? What has been one of the biggest benefits of recovered life for you?
Thank you, anonymous attendee. I really appreciate that. And yes, so my morning routine includes 3 recovery prayers, and then I go into a prayer from the heart. The first one is this Serenity Prayer. As soon as my alarm goes off, I roll over and turn it off, and the first words in my head are, God, grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change. And I go through that prayer, and then immediately I go into the 3rd step prayer. God, I offer myself to thee, to build with me and to do with me as thou wilt. Relieve me of the bondage of self, that I may better do thy will. Take away my difficulties, that victory over them may bear witness to those I would help of thy power, thy love, and thy way of life. May I do thy will always. And then I immediately go into the 7th step prayer. My Creator, I am now willing that you should have all of me, good and bad. I pray that you now remove every single defective character which stands in the way of my usefulness to you and my fellows. Grant me strength as I go out from here to do your bidding. And as I say that, grant me strength, I roll out of bed. And sometimes I have to say, grant me strength as I go out from here to do your bidding 2 or 3 times, because that bed sure feels nice. But
Right.
those are the 3 recovery prayers that really guide me, set my day in motion and guide me. And then next question, what has been one of the biggest benefits of a recovered life for you? That feeling of usefulness. I have meaning to my life now. I'm not just drifting aimlessly, seeking the next dopamine hit, seeking the next numbing out, seeking the next escape. Yes, I still sometimes drift into escapism, but generally there's meaning to my life. There's something more. I get to share my experience, strength, and hope. I get to hear other people's experience, strength, and hope. I get to work with people in things that, yes, can sometimes be really painful when disaster strikes, when choices are made in addiction that cost people marriages, life, all sorts of things that just cost. But in the end, I have meaning and there's worth in my life. And I think that's what the biggest benefit for a recovered life is for me. Thank you for asking that.
Amazing. I love those prayers, and remembering that we're asking God to take the less favorable items too, and that's just part of the package, right? Not just our, like you said, our pedigree and our family name and our reputation and our resume, but all of it. Thank you for that. We have a question from Sarah. Thanks, Justin, for your share and making this an Afro-Euro time zone. Yes, Sarah's active in this time zone. I'm so grateful to be able to participate in real time. My question is, when you find yourself on God's line, how do you jump back onto your line? Nice practical question.
Very practical question. Thank you, Sarah. And sometimes I'm walking down God's line quite a ways before I realize, oh, this isn't my line. And sometimes the fall back to my own line can be kind of painful because of my own thoughts. But how do I jump back onto my line? Well, sometimes I stumble back going, oh, that I just stepped into somebody else's mess that I have no business being in. And I could get chastised out of there by that person, or, lovingly told, hey, Justin, by God, hey, Justin, step back. That's not your problem to deal with. If it becomes something that I want you to help with, I'll invite you in at that point, but you're not invited in. But jumping back when I recognize it before consequences or difficulties happen is more of a how do I want to say this? It's more of an acceptance of, oh yeah, you know what? That's not mine. I'm going to step back and say, God, it's yours. I don't got this, but I trust that you got this. And I can turn that over to God. It's more of an abandoning, the third step prayer, I think, is what it is. I give my will and my life, and I give this situation to you, God, to deal with it as you can. Now put me in a place to help wherever I can help, wherever my line is, to help to those I would help. I think that's those that are within my ability to have an effect on, I guess. I think that answered that question to the best of my ability anyways. Thank you.
Thank you, Sarah, for your question. It looks like we have time for one more question. If anyone would like, I have one of my own, but I'd love to hear from our audience if anyone has another question for Justin today. Okay. Well, and on a high note, maybe, you mentioned joy. I want to hear about how you practice joy. What do you do to implement joy in your spiritual life, in your action plan, however you see fit to answer the question.
Yeah, thank you for that question. How do I experience joy in my life? I wish that I recognized it more often. I often confuse joy with happiness, or happiness with joy. When I feel that rush, I'm like, oh, there's joy. But when I step back and recognize and review my day, when I step back and review my day, review my week, review what's going on in my life, and I feel peace, I think for me, joy and peace are synonymous. They're very much the same thing. And I experience joy, especially when I'm in service, when I'm giving service to others. These Reco12 projects bring me joy. Leading up to them, I can sometimes feel really stressed. I can sometimes feel really anxious. How's this going to work out? But it's because I'm stepping on God's line. I believe that God has put me in this place. Hey, Justin, here's something that I raised you up to do, is to do these types of things and to help facilitate these types of things. And I take my will back and think, oh, I've got to do this perfect. I've got to do this right. And I get anxious. But then once I get into it, like right now, man, I'm not feeling anxiety. I'm not feeling nervousness. I'm feeling peace. I'm feeling joy. I'm feeling presence of a power greater than myself that helps me do that which I cannot do on my own. I mean, if this was left up to me, what a mess. And maybe this is a little bit messy, but still I feel something there. So how do I experience it? In peace, in acceptance, in service. And that's kind of how I experience joy in my life. Thanks. I appreciate that question, Karen.
Yeah. Do you active stuff to jumpstart your joy?
To jumpstart my joy. No, I think it's just in practicing acceptance is how I jumpstart my joy is. Yeah.
Not fighting reality, right?
Yeah, because when I fight against reality, I'm just kicking against, things that aren't gonna move. They're just gonna break my toes if I kick against them, and we talk about in the big book, we stepped on other people's toes and it came back to get us in the end. Well, I can damage my own toes and get myself right now by kicking against things that I have no business kicking against. So I try to stay out of that. Not always successful, but I try.
It also reminds me of that line in the big book that we no longer tire ourselves foolishly. I think it's in step 4, if I'm not mistaken, when we're seeing like the futility and the fatality of all our resentments, and just how exhausting it is when we're trying to run the show.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, wow, that was really amazing. I think we're ready to perhaps all say the full Serenity Prayer. Justin, if you want to put that back on the screen, I will give a last chance if anyone has a burning desire to or question for Justin. We could still squeeze you in. If not, let's have everyone join together and say this. Justin, I believe only you and I can be heard. Is that correct?
Okay. That's correct. Only you and I can be heard. Everybody else can say that. Say it with us, though. It's a great prayer.
Yeah.
All right.
Praying for you and all the other addicts out there who are still suffering.
Okay, I'll lead out. God, grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. Living one day at a time, enjoying one moment at a time, accepting hardship as the pathway to peace, taking, as you did, this sinful world as it is, not as I would have it, trusting that you will make all things right if I surrender to your will, so that I may be reasonably happy in this life and supremely happy with you forever in the next. Your will, not mine, be done. Amen.
Amazing. Amen. Thank you, Justin B. We look forward to hosting you guys in the future. We'll be hosting this Afro-Euro Reco12 podcast, hopefully at least once a month, perhaps 2. And if you think you'd be a relevant and helpful speaker, if you think you have something to pay forward, please be in touch with me. I put my number here. I'll put it in again right now. Karen A. from Jerusalem. And hold on, we also have some info up here, as well as the email. Justin, do you have the Reco12 email for inquiries?
Yeah, the Reco12 email is reco12pod@gmail.com. That's reco12pod@gmail.com. And I can take care of any questions you have.
Okay. Terrific. Well, thank you, everyone. Did we want to mention the other Reco12 shares and all of that, Justin? Should I just paste that in here?
Yeah, if you would like to do that, and I'll also issue an invitation here if you're okay with that. You okay, Karen?
Sure.
Yeah. So if you out there have felt, inspired by anything I've said, or more likely that Karen has said, or any of the questions that were asked, please consider recording a 3 or 4 minute share that will go on the Reco12 Shares podcast. You can find that at any podcast platform you have by looking up Reco12 Shares, and you can record that share at the link that will be in the show notes of the podcast. It's speakpipe.com/Reco12 Shares. And it's just, you can record a share there and have it posted. We've got, I think, 25 episodes up like that. Two more things that are coming up. The Noodle It Out with Nikki podcast, which is a 30-minute Q&A on diving deep into the big book on recovery, life questions. That's starting and going live next Tuesday. And the big book roundtable discussion is going live next Thursday. So we've got 2 more Reco12 projects going live next week, the last week of July. Super excited about them. So thank you for letting me share that, Karen.
Yeah, thank you. Justin is a living, breathing example of expanding your spiritual life, always looking to innovate to the next frontier. And we invite you to join us doing that. And we hope that sharing your experience, strength, and hope, if you've got a nice amount of recovery in your own fellowship and would like to share that here, we hope you'll be in touch and join us. And with that, we wish you all a blessed day, and may you take your experience, strength, and hope and pay it forward, share it with others, spreading more love and light into this world.
I've seen stars fall from above. I've fallen in and out of love. I've been high and I've been low. Now I know I just can't do this on my own. I've seen a boy become a man. He got lost without a plan. He's so far away from home. Now I know I just can't do this on my own. Your arms surrounding me. Your touch is grounding me. No longer searching for purpose all alone. 'Cause now I know that I just can't do this on my own. I'm looking for the words to say. You make the world a better place, and I can call that place my home. 'Cause now I know that I just can't do this on my own. Your arms surrounding me. Your touch is grounding me. No longer searching for purpose all alone. 'Cause now I know that I just can't do this on my own. So let me see just what you need to set you free, so we can be. I saw stars fall from above. I fell in and out of love. I got high and I fell low. But now I know that I just can't do this on my own. No, I just can't do this on my own. I just can't do this on my own.